Farming is an expensive business. It takes a lot of capital to start or to expand. The price of land and equipment is skyrocketing, and so is global demand for food and fuel.
Right now, you're talking $500,000 in order to get enough equipment to farm 1,000 acres.
Now imagine that because of your ethnicity, you were shut out of government finance programs designed to help farmers.
By settling these lawsuits, we're trying to create a different attitude about USDA.
Will that be enough to help some Hispanics and Latinos break into or expand their operations?
My original plan was, come over here and save some money, then go back to Mexico. Now I don't know what to do. Am I going to stay here? I don't know. I saved some money. Am I going to try to do something bigger?
This is Lexington, Nebraska. Located in the central part of the state, this town of about 10,000 people is in the heart of farm country, surrounded by corn and soybean fields. According to the most recent census, Hispanics and Latinos make up 60% of the town's population.
There's no farmers Hispanic in this town. There's people, they own their places that they can have their horses and animals, but they don't produce corn, or they don't do like the farmers does. Most of the people that live in Lexington, they work at Tyson.
Tyson is a large meat processing plant. Many of the 2,700 employees there are immigrants. They grew up farming in their native countries or as migrant workers in the U.S., but they're not farming in Nebraska.
Wait up. Who knows? Point which direction. Where are we turning on?
This is Whitney Davis's first year teaching at Lexington High School. She's the school's agriculture educator and the school's Future Farmers of America advisor.
What I love about being in an ag class, there's so much that I can teach them, so many different angles that I can go at, but also we can actually not just talk about it in the classroom, we can get out and do it.
If everybody wants to grab any of the spiders, if you guys see any of them that have really large...
You can say that in FFA and just in general in our ag classes, it's more of a hands-on experience. It's whatever we learn in the class, we also get to put it out into actual world applications. So as for example, the greenhouse, we learn about plants, we get to try and grow them.
There's so many aspects of agriculture that farming is really only about 20% of the jobs in agriculture. The other 80% are non-traditional farming.
Future Farmers of America might be a misnomer. Many of Davis's students say they'll pursue careers in fields that support agriculture, like welding or engineering.
Our teacher, she made ask the question, how many of us are going to an agricultural based classes later on in life? About only 2 to 3 people raise their hands.
There's few, but they are few among many.
Davis notes that it's only a handful of her white students who plan to be farmers. Their families own land in Nebraska.
So we just take them out of here?
Yep.
Just plant them?
The Hispanic and Latino students have a farming heritage, but more remotely.
When I was younger, almost every 2 years, we'd go down and visit Mexico. I'd go with my dad. He has his own ranch, his farm. He'd take care of animals. He has all kind of cattle. And because I grew up with that, I just had an interest in agriculture, not just, farming. I had in welding and, stuff like that.
Both my mother and father were very agriculturally based because when they were children, they'd always have to go into the mountains, farm, pick up their crops that they planted, and take care of their livestock that they had. My mom had to take care of her goats along with her aunt who was taking care of sheep in the mountains. And then my dad helped pick corn with his brothers and sisters. He also had to pick oranges, lemons, and avocados, because his dad always planted so many things in his backyard. Are these been watered yet? Yes. All right.
But that knowledge and interest didn't translate to farm ownership in the United States.
How much cash do you think you had on hand in your checkings or in your savings account?
The main thing that always comes down to is the money side of things. How much will it cost to get an education in that? How much does it cost to get it started up?
Go in on your hours.
Probably the prices of all the equipment and the land.
Probably owning land, because owning land is really hard.
Lopez and Tekla's parents both work at the beef packing plant. Their kids think their parents would rather be farmers, but money is an issue.
I've asked them that, and probably the only setback for them is the cost of land. You know, that's the only thing that sets them back, and then just the thought of, you know, everything they have to buy, you know, and financially they can't afford it.
The barriers here, well, mostly money. Also, they have us. They just can't switch their occupation because they have us to take care of.
But startup money is hard to come by for any beginning farmer.
There's tremendous challenges right now for beginning farmers across the board, especially if you're doing traditional agricultural development.
Regardless of race, ethnicity, or the size of the operation, many farm families rely on outside jobs to make ends meet.
It's all the way down to those trees over there, those little trees right there. You see the goats over there? That's our land right there.
Okay. That's the case for Efrain Hernandez, a farmer outside Lincoln, Nebraska, who left his native Mexico almost 30 years ago.
I've been all around the United States. I've been Idaho, California, Washington State, Pennsylvania. Then most of the times I just work on agricultural jobs, you know, and this is, when I got here, that was my new job, and I don't know what to do with that, you know, because all I know is drive tractor, grow up plants. Vayan los dos, Pepe.
Hernandez, his wife, and their 3 kids were living near downtown Lincoln for 8 years before they were able to save enough money to buy their 2-acre farm. He's up every morning at 5 to work with his animals, and after his 12-hour workday at an asphalt company, he's back on his land.
Yeah, I like to get bigger, you know, because my whole family, they really like to do this.
What's preventing a farmer like Efrain Hernandez from expanding his farm? Let's back up first. The United States Department of Agriculture has admitted to some inherent discrimination within its loan programs. In 2010, the United States House and Senate approved legislation to fund over $1 billion in settlements for black farmers who were denied loans from the USDA. Native American farmers and ranchers had until December 2011 to file a claim in a similar discrimination class action lawsuit. Now, the USDA is turning its attention to other groups, women and Hispanics.
Because the Supreme Court of the United States determined that the Garcia and Love case, which is Hispanic and women cases, did not qualify as a class action, we are doing this on a volunteer basis. In other words, we're saying if you have a claim or believe you have a claim against USDA from 1981 to 2000, here's a process by which you can have your claim quickly adjudicated and determined.
Those filing claims can receive between $50,000 and $250,000. Vilsack says you can take advantage of the claims process or pursue an individual case in court. The USDA Farm Credit Program comes into play as a so-called last resort lender. A farmer who can't necessarily tap into private bank loans turns to this program. So if you're locked out of that opportunity because of discrimination, what are the lasting effects?
At that critical point when you needed operating and capital loans in order to be able to move forward, if you didn't get them from the lender of last resort, which the USDA farm credit programs have been, you've done enormous damage to that operation. In a lot of cases, you put them out of business. So you didn't just wound them. In a lot of cases, you terminated their agricultural career.
The USDA's top boss wants to settle the discrimination cases and learn from past mistakes.
It's a way in which USDA can, in some way, make things right. It's a way for us to turn the page on a new civil rights history in the USDA. It's part of a much larger effort that we're engaged in at USDA to change the culture of USDA.
Vilsack says once these cases of past discrimination are behind them, the USDA can start focusing on the future and how they can best serve farmers. In the latest ag census, there's been an increase in farms from 2.1 million to 2.2 million. The number of those farms owned by Hispanics and Latinos, 55,000. A pretty substantial increase, according to Kathy Starkweather of the Center for Rural Affairs, a national rural advocacy organization in Lyons, Nebraska.
In the last census from 2002 to 2007, there was an additional approximately 14% growth nationally of farms owned by Latinos and Hispanics. I was curious to see how that looked in Nebraska because my assumption was that would be the same. And in fact, it was not. From 2002 to 2007, there was about a 40% decrease in that number.
Starkweather wanted to know why. It seemed logical to begin by asking farmers about their experiences. The first obstacle the Center for Rural Affairs encountered was just finding these farmers. It's not like they're in the databases of mainstream ag groups.
We've struggled to be able to identify our minority farmers in Nebraska. And as an organization, we struggle. And so a lot of the folks that are out there really want to fit in. They don't want to be denoted in any sort of way as a minority farmer. They want to just be a farmer.
We did use, the old outreach methods that never fail, and you go to the institutions where people congregate, like churches and schools and different kinds of organizations that might serve Hispanic individuals. And then you just start to ask questions. Do you know anybody who's a farmer in the area?
The center hired Rodrigo Gamboa to help find these farmers. Gamboa has worked in Hispanic networks in Nebraska for the last 10 years.
Usually people tell you that we don't have Latino farmers in Nebraska. That is not true. My role was basically try to identify more big numbers of Latino farmers in Nebraska.
Rodrigo is amazing. He knows the networks and he knows which communities are going to or welcome in this kind of a project. So we used his networks.
Latest ag census data shows that there are 166 farms in Nebraska owned by Hispanics or Latinos. The Center for Rural Affairs talked with 17 of them and compiled this report analyzing the barriers Hispanic and Latino farmers and ranchers face. The majority of the people they talked with farmed less than 20 acres. Many of these small producers fall under the radar of the USDA.
Their role is to report the statistics and to report that information. They did readily admit there probably were some mistakes made in gathering that data.
The report says data collected in the ag census is limited because the surveys are based on farmers who regularly interact with the USDA. Most of the farmers in the report had minimal to no interaction with the USDA. But all the farmers in the report came from rural and agricultural backgrounds and see it as a lifestyle. They see farming and ranching almost as a moral obligation. They all wish to expand their operation. They have elementary knowledge about agriculture and agricultural processes in Nebraska and the Midwest. They have limited interaction with the USDA and limited to no knowledge of USDA programs.
The financial system is different and is huge over here. When we offer them USDA programs, help, they have been working, for example, in Mexico with another system because they don't have to pay their money back. They work like something like grants in Mexico.
Acá.
About half of the interviewees described a significant language barrier.
If I was a beginning farmer, I would be nervous about it because I wouldn't know what kinds of questions to ask, even if I knew the language.
The majority of the Hispanic and Latino farmers surveyed operate on a small amount of land. Only 2 of the 17 the center talked with had more than 500 acres. a number that is considered small by today's standards if you're in conventional agriculture. But these 2 Hispanic farmers in Nebraska have been successful living off the land. For Augustine Soto, it was all about a special friendship and hard work. He farms around 700 acres of mostly corn and alfalfa near the western Nebraska town of Morrill.
Now you need a lot of money, a lot of acres to make live. You need a big tractors and anything, more land, and a lot more money too.
Soto came to the United States with his family in the 1960s. He held various jobs, maintenance, worked on a farm, and he was attracted to an employment opportunity with a German-American farmer named Art Dinas.
He kind of passion to me, yes, and I'm passion to him too, because I didn't speak English and he didn't speak Spanish. We didn't look him like a boss. He's like more part of the family. Okay. And I still working a full week for him, and Sundays I kind of go working in mine. And that's the way I started. And later on, I got a little more land and a little more equipment. And finally he quit and he rented me his land for several years.
After Dinas died, Soto bought a lot of his land and other nearby acres, and he admits he wouldn't have been able to make it in farming had it not been for his close relationship with Dinas. For Eleazar Garza, the other Hispanic farmer in the study with more than 500 acres, his story begins in the western United States.
We used to go around, we used to go to Washington, California, and then we'd go south for the winter, and then do it again next year, keep on doing that. My family kept working out in the field, the season working, and so we had acquired a little more on that, and that's how we kept on expanding.
Garza now farms roughly 1,300 acres, everything from corn to sugar beets. He farms with 2 of his 5 kids near the western Nebraska town of Minneter.
I think that's plenty that you could stay out afloat, but I don't think we have to expand, but if there's a chance, we will. We've had good credit, and our bankers always supported us. We've had enough collateral on places that if I go try to buy another place, the farm before that has enough collateral that I don't have to put down a payment on it. So our bank has helped us a lot on that too. There's a few years, about 3 years, that beets were pretty good. That's what kept us alive, and cattle, because corn and beans was pretty low price. But when you diversify, well, if one thing goes down, the other one will keep you afloat, and that's kind of why we try to keep it diversified.
Garza hasn't needed to apply for USDA loans because he's doing just fine with private banks. But what about others, like Efrain Hernandez, the farmer we met just outside of Lincoln? He was also a part of the Center for Rural Affairs study, and he's not applying for any USDA loans anytime soon, even though he thinks it could really benefit his operation.
I go check by check, and right now is not the best time to planning to do that. Maybe in a couple years later, I might gonna think about it. But yeah, it's a good option to do it. I like to make a greenhouse right there, or I don't know how they call them, cube house or whatever. Yeah, I would like to do a couple of those because that's a lot of plants that you can do in almost all year round, like spinach, like cilantro, like onions, like garlics. That's a lot of plants that you might not going to be able to make a lot of money, but you just can do something, in the wintertime and for yourself or, make a little money anyways.
Hernandez knows there's a demand for the food he produces. He's sold to a co-op grocery store in Lincoln and in various community-supported agriculture systems.
But most of the times they ask me cilantro. They always ask me cilantro. I remember the first time when I met him, then she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to ask you to grow up cilantro because you're Mexican, right?" I told him, "Yes, I am Mexican. So I know you can do it and I know you how to do it, so that's what I'm going to buy from you." So I say, "Okay."
Selling cilantro helps Hernandez break even on his small farming operation, but it's his full-time job with an asphalt company that pays his family's living expenses. Kathy Starkweather and the Center for Rural Affairs set out to answer questions about what was holding Hispanic and Latino farmers back. Among their findings is that the USDA has minimal outreach to Latino farmers and ranchers. The center has sponsored some meetings to try to bridge that gap, something she thinks can be modeled across the country because this is not just a Nebraska problem.
There are some things that can be done to get information to some of the Hispanic and Latino farmers in the Midwest and beyond. Develop some kind of a no wrong door approach to going into a USDA agency. You have USDA, Natural Resources Conservation Service, Farm Service Agency, and Rural Development, usually in the same building in a community. Because we're not asking the right questions or asking any questions, that farmer may come in and the language is a barrier, and they're not asked, well, perhaps this program over at Farm Service Agency would be a benefit to you.
Just throwing that water out. Take it and let's water the ones you guys just planted with it. All right. Okay.
A new approach by the USDA might yield different farmers in the future. But one thing's far more certain. The majority of ag students today in Lexington, Nebraska, and across the country see future in ag-related fields, just not the fields that grow sugar beets and corn.
My career's not going to be in agriculture, but I like agriculture because I want to become a doctor one day, so I might pursue the career of medicine.
Wow, look at those.
If it doesn't work out with a doctor, I might become an agriculturalist, become a farmer probably.
Back in Guatemala, my parents were currently trying to finish purchasing off around 160 acres worth of land over there. Everything that I can learn here, I could put in an application over there and help others over there too.
I would like to be a farmer and just growing crops like soybean or sweet corn. Yes, a big farm, own a nice tractor. I'm guessing about 100 to 200 acres.
At $2,400 an acre, the average land value in Nebraska, it'll take $240,000 just to get that 100-acre farm.
The issue of land is the same everywhere, and I don't know how we're going to get over that hurdle. We are trying to connect landowners with beginning farmers, and that perhaps will be an avenue if we can remind farmers that, most of them when they started out kind of had a sweetheart deal. I mean, they knew somebody, it was family-owned farm that was handed down to them, and how are we going to address that with this upcoming generation?
It's an issue that will impact a potential new generation of Hispanic and Latino farmers.
This is a work in progress. The trick to all of this is to recognize that there is a problem and that there's a need to try to bring remedy.
The USDA is trying to create a new attitude within its department.
We're increasing diversity within our own ranks, within our own employment of USDA employees, which will make it a little bit easier. At the same time, we're encouraging commodity groups to expand the diversity of folks that they submit for boards and commissions. We're also, obviously, by settling these lawsuits, we're trying to create a different attitude about USDA.
The hope is that it will lead to more farming opportunities for Hispanics and Latinos nationwide. But for Efrain Hernandez, he's just concentrating on raising his kids like he was raised in Mexico.
My original plan was, come over here and save some money, then go back to Mexico. But since, we are working and we try to save some money, then we find this place. So now I don't know what to do. Am I going to stay here? I don't know. I really like it. I really love it.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.